This is my kind of my weed garden. I'm very lucky to have one. I use a lot of these materials for my work itself. And this morning I've been, cutting out these kind of grassy straw thing that just kind of grows wild.
In an age where pictures are defined by pixels, San Jose-based photographer Bin Dan has discovered a decidedly low-tech approach to the art.
As a kid, I mowed the lawn a lot, so I noticed that wherever the water hose was placed on the part of the lawn on a really hot summer day, it would leave a silhouette, a shadow in a way, a shadow of the water hose. You can see that part of this lawn actually losing its chlorophyll. It's actually turning yellow, and in another week or two, we really have nice sunlight. This will be yellow. From that experiment, I started to play around with works on the lawn. So I will leave two water hoses on the lawn, making parallel lines and swirly designs and things like that. Okay.
Those early trials became the basis for a much more sophisticated artistic technique.
What I do is I place a transparency on top of a living leaf, sandwich that in a piece of between two sheets of glass, and leave that in the sun for about a week to 4 weeks, depending on the weather. And then from there on, the image is transferred onto the leaf. When I remove a negative off one of these leaves that I've been printing in the sun for several weeks, there's actually such a wonderful feeling, this magic quality of this picture emerging on top of this leaf. The feeling of just pure nature to doing its magic.
It's not just the technique that has captivated people's attention. It's the ghostly images embedded in the leaves. Bin's prints are from photographs of the Vietnam War, a war which ravaged his native country and forced his family into a refugee camp.
Require our person to present a valid passport.
In 1979, Bin's family fled to the United States. He was 2 years old.
This is quite an amazing picture for me because I never seen a picture of my family in Vietnam before. They say that photographs bring up memories, and for me it started to actually almost fabricate these memories of my life in Vietnam. When I was growing up in this country, all I know about was Vietnam was a war, and my parents actually rarely talk about their time and lives in Vietnam. So, as a child, I always have these questions.
Bin seeks answers to his questions in the faces of the dead, whose images he imprints onto living leaves. The leaves are reminiscent of those found in the tropical jungles and rice paddies of his native land, where he recently traveled for the first time, collecting more of the images he uses in his work.
It takes the photograph back to its organic nature. It reminds us where we came from, which is actually from the land. The continuation of the landscape is in us, and when we die, we return to this land again. I stumbled upon this issue right here from June 27. Life magazine published the portrait of these guys who were killed during the week of May 20 to June 3rd, 1969. And it's almost like a yearbook of faces that are no longer alive. A lot of my work has to do a lot about death itself. These are portraits of civilians who were exterminated during the Pol Pot regime. These are like kind of ancestral altars for me, because when I look at them, they look like almost like people I know. When the people are really looking back at you and kind of asking about what happened to them, asking about history, why did this happen? I think that's kind of the power of this portrait.
To be confronted with their face, looking at you through a plant leaf, is, you just very physically and emotionally just feel that line through history. You just really feel like these are spirits from another world, spirits from another time that are coming back to bear witness to what's happening today.
A year and a half ago, intersection curator Kevin Chen approached Bin about exhibiting his work at the Mission District Gallery. Bin accepted and suggested the show include the work of another young photographer whom he had recently met, Elizabeth Moy.
But the first one I ever saw was this one, right? The one of you.
Like Bin, Elizabeth is linked to the Vietnam War through her family. Her father, Steve Moy, is a military helicopter pilot who started his career in the Vietnam War.
Before my dad left for Vietnam, he started getting interested in photography, and so when he left for Vietnam, he took his camera with him.
The photo sat in the box for more than 3 decades until Steve Moy was called back into combat, this time in Iraq.
Right before he actually told me that he was leaving, I asked him to look at the slides.
Inspired by her father's archive of photographs, Elizabeth created a series of images intended to be displayed alongside her father's work.
This is from his archive. The self-portrait he took in '68, and then this is the one that I took of him right before he left. You don't tend to see a whole lot of pictures of your parents looking very vulnerable. That's a little bit scary.
When I saw those photographs, I fell in love with the work right away. I thought there's someone else out there who is also trying to find these stories too.
Both Ben and I, clearly have an interest in history and memory. I have no memory of the war because it happened before me, and Ben doesn't as well because he was too young. And so this idea that we're both sort of recreating our own history, I think that's what sort of connects the two of us and our work.
This is great. I'm excited. Let me know how. I might want to try it now.
An outing to make photographs in Golden Gate Park is more than just about art.
But my father was in the war too, of course.
Did your dad have to kill anyone?
I never asked him that. But he has a wound right here.
That's crazy.
Yeah, the bullet, and his, they went through his face. And so he has that mark.
I never asked my dad if he had killed anybody because it's just too painful.
Right.
I think it's important to understand that experience of my father being in combat or the experience of war in the past in order to understand the future. And the same thing, about my relationship to my father, in order to understand him now, it's important for me to kind of understand who he was then.
This exhibition in and of itself is kind of an alternative memorial to the legacy of war, albeit filtered through 2 very specific individual voices and perspectives. Hopefully it's a space for reflection and contemplation, one that also can just spark that thought in people that come to the gallery, just to see how these wars have impacted their own lives.
For me, it becomes almost like a religion. It's almost my religious practice when I make my own artwork, because I'm coming up with my own concept about what is life, what is death, what is consciousness, and what is history. So I think that for me is my personal gain when I make this work.